On this Tuesday night, the message from First Nations chiefs to the Prime Minister.
The pipeline going to BC's coast is nothing but a pipe dream.
What Mark Carney is promising them. A Canadian border officer falsely accused by the Indian government of being a Sikh separatist and terrorist.
It's left me fearing for my life.
Why he believes he was singled out. A Global News exclusive. The jury's out. Why more court cases in England and Wales will be heard only by a judge. Plus, he was the last man executed in Halifax.
We're really trying to get the truth out there, and it's not just specifically for this case.
A Canadian man's goal to clear his great-great-grandfather's name.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's First Nations leaders gave Prime Minister Mark Carney a clear message today about what they think of the prospect of a new oil pipeline from Alberta to BC. 600 chiefs at the Assembly of First Nations voted unanimously to reject any exemptions to the ban on oil tankers off BC's northern coast and asked Ottawa to withdraw the memorandum of understanding signed by Carney and Alberta's Premier last week.
Canada can create all the MOUs, project offices, advisory groups that they want, but chiefs are united. When it comes to approving large national projects on First Nations lands, there will not be getting around rights holders.
After that, the Prime Minister addressed the chiefs, promising nothing will be built without consultation. David Akin has our top story tonight.
The first resolution is draft emergency resolution number 1.
It was the first order of business at the biannual meeting of the Assembly of First Nations, a motion to reject the lifting of a tanker ban on BC's north coast and the entire Canada-Alberta memorandum of understanding itself.
I ask that we stand unified against any government that makes agreements behind closed doors without us.
The chief of this northern Haida community moved the motion, and 97% of the 600 or so chiefs present voted with him.
The pipeline going to BC's coast is nothing but a pipe dream.
But in his 20-minute speech to the Assembly of First Nations, Prime Minister Mark Carney did not once refer to the Alberta MOU or a pipeline. But he did repeat his promise to full consultations with First Nations on any major resource development project.
And crucially, we will build in partnership by upholding Indigenous rights and building in ways that First Nations communities have greater security and greater prosperity.
But promises to consult now, after that MOU was signed, rankled some chiefs.
They're really coming back and asking the questions afterwards, which doesn't sit well with many First Nations. We should have been part of the whole discussion.
One other important point that's angered many Indigenous leaders: many First Nations in BC and Alberta have been busy working on new mines, alternative energy, forestry, and so on. Now, the community resources devoted to those economic development projects are being diverted to this pipeline proposal and away from what could be real economic activity that could be happening right now. Donna.
David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. There have long been promises to eliminate boil water advisories in First Nations communities. Today, Prime Minister Carney said clean drinking water legislation for First Nations will come next spring, not this fall, as promised. He pledged a joint meeting with provinces, territories, and First Nations early in the new year. He says 85% of boil water advisories have been lifted since 2016, and another $2.3 billion is earmarked to end the remaining 38. The Liberal government's signature housing program, which was hailed as the most ambitious since the Second World War, is not exactly as promised, according to the Parliamentary Budget Office. The PBO projects just 26,000 units will be built over 5 years, which will do little to close the country's housing gap. And it warns federal spending on housing is set to drop sharply, even as the housing minister says the new agency is just getting started. Mackenzie Gray reports.
Showing off his construction chops has been a regular photo op for Mark Carney, accompanied by bold promises.
We will build at a pace not seen since the Second World War.
But a new report from the interim parliamentary budget officer says the Liberals are nowhere on track to meet the Prime Minister's lofty goals.
We estimate about 26,000 units will be created over the next 5 years.
The Liberals, who have previously sparred with the PBO, dispute the numbers, saying their spending will help build 86,000 units.
I think this is just the beginning, and we're going to deliver a ton of affordable housing, and we're going to leverage a lot of investment from across Canada to get that done.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The report, political ammunition for the Conservatives.
Why won't he listen to us and stop building bureaucracy so that we can start building homes?
The great thing about being a lifelong member of Parliament is you've never built anything and you don't know numbers.
Numbers the Liberals don't dispute, a 56% cut in federal housing funding from 2025 to 2029, with multiple current programs expiring without replacement. That has leading housing experts saying Carney's goal of building 500,000 houses annually won't be met.
The last 2 years of the Trudeau government were more ambitious on housing than what we've seen from the Carney government.
While the finance minister is promising additional funding for housing in the future, the Liberals have already guaranteed massive increases to other key programs.
We'll have accelerated old age security spending by $29 billion in a single year. Here you have the PBO saying we're going to cut spending on housing in that same year. That is just a very big intergenerational tension.
A core Carney campaign message was wanting to build things at speeds never seen before, Donna, but the PBO's housing report is one of the first major indicators that Carney's promise isn't coming to fruition.
Mackenzie Gray, thank you. An employee with the Canada Border Services Agency in BC is suing the Indian and Canadian governments over what he calls an Indian state-sponsored disinformation campaign. He says he was falsely accused by Indian media of being a Khalistani terrorist fighting for an independent Sikh state. When he reported the allegations and abuse to his employer, he says things went from bad to worse. Jeff Semple has this Global News exclusive.
Good evening and welcome to the Blue.
In the Indian news media, it was promoted as an explosive story. A Sikh separatist and terrorist wanted by the Indian government was found working for Canada's Border Services Agency.
Sandeep Singh Sidhu, who India has officially made an extradition request for, is a Canadian government employee.
Sandeep Sidhu is indeed a Canadian border officer, but according to him and the Canadian government, the Indian media's allegations are completely false.
It's a nightmare. It's a living nightmare.
Sidhu was born and raised in BC. For 20 years, he's worked for the CBSA, promoted to superintendent, and once appeared on the reality TV program Border Security, which aired on Global.
She's a little fidgety and restless too,
Sidhu is an ethnic Sikh, but says he doesn't practice religion and has absolutely nothing to do with any political or Sikh separatist group.
I'm not that person. I'm not associated with that person. My last name is Sidhu. Sidhu is a very common last name. In the Sikh culture, it's akin to Smith.
Agents of the government of India.
The allegations against Sidhu first emerged after Canada accused the Indian government of assassinating a Sikh separatist leader in BC back in 2023, which India furiously denied.
Dreaded terrorists are being employed by the Canadian government.
Since then, India's news media has been pumping out stories portraying Canada as a hotbed of Khalistani terrorists.
The news has realized that this stuff sells very well.
This disinformation expert says the Indian media seems to care less about the facts.
It's more about the emotional stuff that you can say, oh, is this another case of Canada attacking India? Clearly, it must be.
As India looked to fire back against Canada, Sidhu's lawyer believes his client fit the bill.
They needed a convenient patsy.
The photograph used in the Indian media's coverage was from Sidhu's visa application in 2019, when he traveled to India for a family wedding.
They found somebody who worked for the Canadian government, picked him out of the air because he has Sikh heritage, and threw him under the bus.
Sidhu was then inundated with what police say were credible death threats, like this one posting his family's address.
It's left me fearing for my life. It's left me fearing for my family's safety.
When he alerted his employer, the CBSA responded by launching an investigation into Sidhu, led by CSIS. After 10 months, he was cleared of any wrongdoing, but no statement was ever issued, and he says no help or protection were ever provided.
I feel abandoned, betrayed, and left to deal with this on my own.
Sidhu is now suing both the Indian government for falsely accusing him and the Canadian government for allegedly failing to protect one of its own. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
The Alberta government intends to fight the federal government's gun buyback program. It plans to use its so-called Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act to sidestep federal laws when the amnesty for existing gun owners expires next year. Heather Yorick-West explains the strategy and how it once again pits Alberta against Ottawa.
It's a collection J.R. Cox carefully maintains and protects, but keeping these firearms will be illegal soon.
These are part of the Order in Council ban. The
federal government granted amnesty to existing owners of the 2,500 types of firearms that were banned in 2020, but that amnesty will be expiring next fall. To compensate, Ottawa is offering to buy those guns back before they're ultimately seized. But
we will oppose any policy that undermines law-abiding firearm owners and does not combat the criminal use of firearms.
Using its Sovereignty Act, the Alberta government says it will direct all provincial entities, including municipal police forces, not to implement the federal gun seizure program. Crown prosecutors will also be given guidance not to pursue charges against gun owners who fail to surrender their banned guns or who use their firearms to protect themselves, their families, or homes.
Got a little tip for low-life criminals out there. If you don't want to get shot, don't break into someone's house.
The issue of gun rights is an important one to the United Conservative Party's base, who over the weekend booed the Premier for signing an agreement with the federal government over energy policy.
Not every firearm owner is a separatist, but the separatists have really latched on to the firearms file. And so there has to be movement, there has to be accommodation.
But the federal government says, motion or not, when it comes to federal law, all gun owners will need to comply.
We will require compliance, so at some point, provinces and territories need to come on board.
Setting the stage for another Alberta-Ottawa showdown, with a fight that no promised pipeline can pacify. Heather Yorick-West, Global News, Calgary.
Carter Hart, one of 5 of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey Team members acquitted of sexual assault, is set to make his return to the NHL. The 27-year-old goaltender, who signed with the Vegas Golden Knights in October, is now eligible to play after his NHL suspension ended. He's expected to start in net tonight with the Knights when they host the Chicago Blackhawks. Hart signed a 2-year, $4 million contract. President Trump threatens further attacks coming up. What he's now saying about the deadly strikes on suspected drug boats. The U.S. president is now warning that any country he believes is making illegal drugs destined for the United States is vulnerable to a military attack by U.S. forces. And there's a new take on a Venezuelan boat that was destroyed by the U.S. in September. The White House now says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the strikes, but did not give an order to kill everybody on board, including survivors. At the same time, the Trump administration keeps ramping up the pressure on Venezuela's government. Jackson Prosco reports.
Whether it's posturing or preparation, the American military buildup in the Caribbean shows no sign of slowing. 15,000 U.S. troops are now deployed as the drumbeat of conflict over drug trafficking grows louder.
Anybody that's doing that and selling it into our country is subject to attack.
In Washington, the Trump administration is already on the defensive over its initial strikes on alleged drug boats, with the legality of this strike on September 2nd called into question after the Washington Post reported Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave an order to kill everybody on board. 2 passengers survived the initial strike and were then killed by a second targeted strike.
This is called the fog of war.
The Pentagon says that second strike was authorized by the admiral responsible for the operation and that Hegseth didn't personally see survivors in the water.
Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved.
While the White House and Pentagon reject any claim of illegality, lawmakers, including some Republicans, believe otherwise.
The second strike is a war crime because these individuals were injured. They were in the water. The basic rules of war that are involved here make very clear that you do not strike wounded people in the water in order to kill them.
Those legal questions extend to the prospect of a broader operation targeting Venezuela and its president, Nicolas Maduro.
It's a completely made up and false sense that we're at war, we can do whatever we want, but if Congress wants to vote on it, no, we're not at war.
The Trump administration still hasn't sought authorization from Congress and hasn't revealed any plans to do so. All the while continuing to build up troops near Venezuela, hinting that strikes on land will happen next. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
The Canadian publisher of a beloved children's book is condemning a post made by the U.S. Defense Secretary. On Sunday, Pete Hegseth shared this AI-generated image showing a manipulated image of Franklin the Turtle book called Franklin Targets Narco-Terrorists. Publisher Kids Can Press pushed back in a statement saying the character stands for kindness, empathy, and inclusivity. The U.S. president is claiming Honduras is trying to change the results of the election there, where the front runners are just 515 votes apart. President Trump has endorsed the right-wing candidate Nasri Asfura, who has a razor-thin margin over the Liberal Party's Salvador Nasrallah. The vote count has been plagued with technical problems. In an online post, Trump warned there will be hell to pay, as he says, if the results change. At the same time, the former president of Honduras has been released from a U.S. prison where he was serving a 45-year sentence for drug trafficking and firearms convictions. President Trump granted him a full pardon. Wholesale giant Costco is suing the Trump administration over tariffs imposed on imported goods. Costco wants to ensure it will be fully refunded by the U.S. government if the Supreme Court rejects Trump's argument that he has authority to impose tariffs. The court is expected to rule on that case in the spring. Costco says about 1/3 of its U.S. sales are imported goods. Justice reform ahead, why England and Wales are scrapping jury trials for some cases. England and Wales are making major changes to try to tackle a backlog of cases. Certain cases will no longer be heard by juries. Victims of crimes are often left waiting for years for cases to go to court, and backlogs are a problem here in Canada, too. It is controversial, though, in a country where jury trials are a long-held right. Redmond Shannon explains the changes and the Canadian inspiration behind them. Redmond.
Well, the right to a jury trial at courts like this dates back more than 8 centuries to the writing of the Magna Carta here in England in the year 1215, a right that has now spread to jurisdictions around the world. But now, due to a huge backlog of cases, that right to be judged by your peers in England and Wales is set to be scaled back. Pending a vote in Parliament, cases that would result in sentences of less than 3 years in jail will be tried by a judge only.
Investment is not enough. The caseload is projected to reach 100,000 by 2028, and without fundamental change could keep rising, meaning justice will be denied to more victims and trust in the system will collapse.
Only a small fraction of cases in England and Wales go before a jury. That number is now expected to drop by about 1/3. The change takes inspiration from Canada, where the judge-only rule already applies to most cases of up to 5 years in jail.
If you have a bench that's appointed like ours, responsible, learned members of a specialist criminal bench, in my opinion, you'll get a better trial than you'll get with a jury.
But there are huge backlogs in Canada too. Many lawyers here and there say resources are the main problem. According to a report in the Globe and Mail, about 10,000 cases a year are stayed or withdrawn by going beyond an 18 or 30-month time limit, even for serious crimes like sexual assault and murder. The federal government and a number of provinces are currently asking the Supreme Court of Canada to reconsider the rules around those time limits. Donna?
All right, Redmond Shannon in London, thank you. Exoneration effort next. A Halifax man works to clear his great-great-grandfather's name 90 years after Daniel Perry Sampson was executed. An award-winning musician is on a personal quest for justice. In 1935, Lance Sampson's great-great-grandfather was the last man to be executed in Halifax, convicted of a crime legal experts now maintain he did not commit. Sampson is now pushing for an exoneration. Heidi Petracek on why he's making this case for justice.
This is a modern-day eulogy for a man who died 90 years ago. The song Gallows was penned by Halifax artist Lance Sampson to draw attention to what he describes as a miscarriage of justice.
My grandmother has always tried to tell me, Carolyn Sampson has always tried to tell me what was going on, but I don't think I really started to understand the weight of it until I got older.
Daniel Perry Sampson was an African Nova Scotian veteran of the First World War with the historic all-black No. 2 Construction Battalion. But 16 years after the war, he was hanged in Halifax's last execution in 1935, convicted of murder by an all-white jury in the death of 2 young brothers after police claimed he confessed.
The family has been affected by this over generations, and to exonerate Daniel, which is our goal, is something that needs to happen.
Lawyer David Steeves has done years of research on the case. His conclusion, Sampson was wrongfully convicted.
Because the confession that he purportedly signed when he was arrested was signed by an ex, because the RCMP officers at that time said he didn't have sufficient education and didn't know how to read and write.
Yet documents show Sampson signed his name on military discharge papers in 1919 and his 1924 marriage registry too.
But no one ever asked him if he could read and write. You know what I mean? No one asked him.
Just one key piece of evidence, they say, was ignored then, but can't be now.
We're really trying to get the truth out there, and it's not just specifically for this case. Like it's the truth of all of the cases that really don't get the proper treatment.
Their request for a review is now in the hands of the Federal Justice Department, a push for exoneration in a case generations of Sampsons can't forget. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Vancouver. It's December, and we'd love to see your festive Canada photos. Please email them to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.